24,000 or so away from hitting Marshall. But I think Baby already hit it. If somebody wants to check that out. But I think Baby already hit Marshall. If not, she's so close. She's so close. Um, but me and Baby been going back and forth on the merit ranks there for well, not back and forth. She's always been ahead of me. But I've been chasing her down for a little while. So it's definitely one of those things where I think really all nations, except for like the brand new ones that don't know their ass from their elbow and they're still like rubbing shit in their hair. But the nations that know for the most part what they're about, what they're doing, if you can, make a GC final or get, do well in your void wars, or even call it the head of state in general. I'm not a big fan of the double frenzy head of state, so I kind of tend to stand down from that one just because it's so much for not much in return. But the double void war, I personally, I like that event. Try to pay attention to it a little bit, and I think everybody, at least in our team, tends to not want to show up, as much in a void war as they will for like a frenzy. So I tend to do the opposite of what people like necessarily, love or like to do, and I'd like to force people to do things that make them a little bit uncomfortable, and then sometimes it pans off. I had a player that, just this in this event that we had just left, we had a player, and after the event, I was like, so how do I get you to show up like you do in Elite War and Triangle War and all the other team events that they do so well in, but they typically sit in a bubble on Sunday. It's like, how do I get you to perform that way, on Sunday? And I'd like to think all it sometimes does is just, putting a label on it, calling out the action a little bit, and applying a little bit of pressure, and sometimes people rise to the occasion.
People are afraid to lose troops.
I mean, you can't really be afraid to lose troops when you have 200 million BP. It doesn't make a lot of sense, especially when you have a team like ours. It's not like you're out fucking playing alone. If you're playing alone, then sure, I can understand that don't want to lose troops things. But these are like 150 to 200 million BP cities. Sure, they're killable, against the right team, but a majority of the time, that's not the case. There's only a handful of nations, in my opinion, that can really kill one of GFK's cities. Right? Just call that for what it is. And I don't say that from an ego perspective. I say that from we have a great team, and it's not easy to kill us. And you better come with a lot of people, to attempt to kill a 200 million BP city in GFK. It's just not something that happens every day. It hasn't happened in probably my career, honestly. So long and short of it is these are things that really don't happen, and you shouldn't be afraid to fight when you have a team like that. Continuing to back up the conversation of guys, you need a team. You know, and maybe like continuing to use Ronaldo as an example as a whale that's been carrying his nation for quite some time. But there's two of them. There's Treehouse and Ronaldo. There's two of them. Maybe Ronaldo's a little bit more vocal in the things that he says and does, but there are two major max out cities in that particular nation, but they've carried the entire nation. I think anybody who's played a Void War or a Frenzy against 693 or any Chinese nation for that matter, there's like 3 or 5 cities playing, and that's it. Everyone else just kind of sits in a bubble or drops a bubble for points. They're just horrible. And there's a couple of monsters flying around, which is very typical to your Chinese nations. So, in this sense, here we are with Ronaldo and then the Treehouse guy, and there's two max cities. But man, if you go look at the rest of that nation, man, they're kind of wet paper bag. I don't even want to call them like a paper tiger because they're just not that advanced and they're not that strong at all. But if they show up in numbers, like I think there's a lot of nations out there that aren't the strongest, but they show up in insane amount of numbers, and it just wipes away so much. Shout out to Bayou because I was talking shit to Bayou when the matching was done, and and I was like, oh, I'm gonna make it expensive for you. One of those deals, talking shit. He's like, I don't care, man. I'm coming with 100. That was his response to me, you know? And he was dead ass. He wasn't even talking shit, you know? And he's a man of his word too, because he showed up with 99, but that's all they have in Alliance. Literally showed up with every single person. I was blown away, really was. So these are all things that I think everyone in the community really should be, you know, focusing on. I don't see any other way to do it, and I feel like if we're going to keep the game alive and well for however long you want to continue to play it, the globes as they continue to pop open, or the nations as they continue to pop open every few days, the guys that are closer up into those nations, like all the if there's good 1,200 nations, which I doubt there are just yet, honestly, and I say that with respect. I feel like the halfway decent nations are like the 1100s and down. But there might be a couple of decent teams up there and say the 1,200s. Man, you guys need to be reaching out to the 1,300s and doing your best. If you can't recruit them, cool, but at least help them. At least drop the YouTube. For the handful of people that we support, at least drop some Discord servers in there. So, if you can't recruit them, cool. That we understand that they want to build their own nation, and and see how it works out a couple of years from now. Respect the game and the player, but at least try to point them in the right direction so people are getting the right information. We want to be able to promote people building teams, building proper cities, and not having YouTube creators sharing 11198. Right, I saw that earlier. Right, Hawkage. Like these are these are all things that we don't want. Right, we don't want to have the new YouTuber that promotes ridiculousness. And dropping knowledge that probably shouldn't be dropped, to people who don't understand the game, because they're going to take that and they're going to run with it. We want to be able to spread the information that's true and proper, and we want to be able to get to a point where at least we know that if we can't recruit them, because yeah, it would be nice to just grab the monsters out of the brand new nation, bring them to yours, and mosey along and kill out a couple of the dead nations. That works, but that also kills the game if you do that, with just everybody, right? You need new nations to, grow, and all those things, right? Just to, take one for the team for camels. You kind of need that, but you also want to be able to find the teams that just suck. You know, like I'll just use mental. Well, just use Mental as an example. Not to say that his team sucked, but they weren't getting much far, and he was kind of like a one man band, or maybe there was another guy there for a little while, but I think he was taking a break there in that time. It's just like, listen, dude, like I'm sure that your nation's great and your city's amazing, but you know, there's a team here. We're ready to go. And when he came over, it took him a little while to understand that there's a team there. Like he had made a comment during a void one time, and he's like, yeah, I'm a little scared of going over there. I think he was like maybe 250 million BP, and it was against a really good nation, that probably could have burned him, if he was alone in the corner by himself. And the long and short of it is, it was like, hey, I almost had to like grab him and shake him a little bit. It's like, dude, you're good, man. Just click the app button. Look how many people are online right now. And I know you're maybe used to seeing 5 or 15, 20 maybe online at any given time in 495. But, on a Void War Sunday, I mean, any given time, you're going to see 30 to 70, depending on the time. And with that many people online, man, you're not going to burn, dude, you know? So yeah, I mean, after all that little bit of back and forth, people get to understand, and using Mental as an example there, makes them feel comfortable, because at least they have support, and they understand that they can go out, they can lower the shield, and even if they are attacked, it's cool because we're coming, you know, like we understand that whales are hunted, because we do it. And I think any good team out there, and I can, name off a bunch of them, but any good team out there is hunting those cities, to kill. This is ultimately, I don't want to call it an egos game, but, primarily men play this. So I know how men think at least. And, I get some weird satisfaction from, you know, making a grown man smash his phone against the floor, or, or taking, taking away several thousand or tens of $1,000 of their troops for conversation's sake. You know, um, it's always better when there's a rival on there, but even if it's just for the love of winning the game, you know, I think that I have built a lot of good relationships throughout the years, and you know, and I think there's even some old podcasts where I even told Raz that unless it came down to us, you know, like losing the match, you know, I don't think that you know, I'd have my team attack you just because I think we're cool. Now, obviously, that kind of changed using Raz as an example because you know we smacked his ass and essentially made him quit the game. You know, but I feel like it's becoming a rolling trend for some reason. You know, it's I don't know. I think what you mentioned it made me think about it. You know, starting from like Ram and then Raz and I don't know if Shrimp's around anymore, but me and Shrimp had a thing for a little while, and I think he's kind of gone now, even though his city name hasn't changed per se. Now Ronaldo. I mean, I'm like pretty. I don't want to say confident, but I feel like if I had to put a little bit of wager on it, like the odds would be in my favor that he'd be quitting. You know, here in the near future. Um, you know, but I don't like to make people quit. You know, I think in Ronaldo specifically, you know, he ran his mouth and that you know whatever I said in the podcast he can reach out to me, he can apologize, but if he doesn't, he can call me daddy, you know, one way or the other. You know, so these are all things that you know, people get to roll across, but I always think a good rivalry is pretty decent. You know, there's a lot of things that you know potentially come from it, but at least it fuels a fire and you know brings motivation. And you know I'm sure Baby sent a great message, you know, to the group over there, or even Bayou did after his comment in the Discord, you know, that they were fighting 425 and lead God and mental, and they need to show up, you know, everybody, and you know, I think that's good motivation for certain, you know, for certain teams. You know, everybody really should be, you know, again, building that team the best way they can. You know, and I think if you have a great team, I think you don't have to spend as much money on the game that you know you think you have to. You know, I say it pretty often that GFK is. I don't want to say primarily because we definitely spend money in GFK, but we have a good amount of free players or players that spend very, very little on it. They're just hyperactive and they're like-minded. Some of what David said. They know their. I don't want to say they know their place, but they know what they bring to the team. They know how to add value to the team. They're always there. They don't complain. You know, I almost felt bad today because so we had a you know I'll share it in the chat for those who I've pretty much shared it on every platform, but I'll throw it out there. So we had Ronaldo today. Uh, or I'll try to put it in the chat. And it took like 2 minutes. And we were kind of talking a little shit in the Alliance chat. And hold on 1 second. Trying to send it in the chat. It doesn't seem like it's going for some reason.
There's a video in the chat, yes.
Okay, there you go. Yeah. So I don't think you know, again, I don't do character names or you know, I don't speak Chinese or anything like that. So I don't know if Ronaldo's there. I'm fairly certain he's not, you know, just based off of a couple of different KPIs. But I'm pretty sure he's not. But there is a you know, a clear, hey man, you know, this is gonna happen again. We're already scheduled for two more, you know, elite wars with this guy. He's already not showing up here. I haven't heard a peep from him on any Discord server, and I'm in the same Discord servers. I feel like you know that's I haven't heard a peep from this guy, like not even in the slightest capacity. And it took like 8 of us to burn like the 45 members that showed up, you know, to this particular elite or this point. Um, you know, and it was I don't know. It was quick. It was, you know, fairly easy for us because again, it was only, you know, two people there. But these are two players, you know, again, Ronaldo and Treehouse that are in a place where, I mean, they're stuck, right? Like they're stuck in 693 with the nation that they essentially built, you know, and what are they going to do? I mean, there's some decent cities there. Don't get me wrong, but without a merger, they're not going anywhere. They're not going to get any better anytime soon. Nobody's spending money there. You know, but if every one of those people really showed up, could they beat us? No, but like they can, at least have a good shot at it. Using this as an
True.
example, like I felt bad that eight of us burned the base, and I got like 900 merit, and I didn't think that the rest of my team would get good rewards, because I think it was Holbrook that had made a comment in one of the Discord channels, like, "Oh, the battle was so fast, you're not going to get good rewards." And I had known for myself that I got 900 merit, based off of whatever it came in the mail there. But I almost felt bad that we had rushed the base and the rest of the team. We had like 91 or something like that this morning, and the rest of the team only got like a couple of hundred or something like that. But that wasn't the case, and once I asked, it was they got 600. So the team literally just showed up this morning, proper time, and showed up for the elite war. They didn't have to kill one troop. They got 600 merit. Yes, this today was one of those instances where the call it the Mayday team kind of just rushed the base, if you would. um but a majority of the time, it's using 255 and a couple of other good nations out there. All you have to do is show up with numbers, and you can just you know 8 out of 10 teams, you're gonna beat, even if they're have those monster players. And I see 5, 6, 7s taking a couple of jump up in the rankings, so their team's probably coming together after their self-made merger. So there's a lot of nations out there, especially in, call it, the sub 700s, that are kind of doing their own little merger thing. Whether it's recruiting or putting cities together. I know in 425 we always are just asking. We have a couple of players that kind of like our recruiters, if you would, but they're more recruiters of figuring out who's next to I guess quit the game or move on from the game. Just like, at least communicate with us, because we don't like randoms, number one. And we want to be able to find the next person to come into the city if we can. And because that turnover means a lot. So I know for the older nations out there, you guys should be thinking, kind of the same way. Think of that turnover. Think of making sure there's an ass in that seat. That means a lot in these older nations. But some of these newer nations, guys, you guys really should be thinking. And not saying that you're a max player like Mental, but just a normal player that is losing often in certain nations. And or if you're sitting in a bubble, watching the whale work. I don't think that's fun. you know and that's not like a jab at like a 5, 6, 7 or anything like that, because I know those guys come fight, they fight hard. I know they have like a little whatever, a flag that kind of says that you guys know what I'm saying. It's more of putting it together, and making that team well oiled. Because, man, I'll tell you what. Again, that wasteland experience against 255 the other day was humbling. But it was also motivating. Not at any point in time was I upset about just getting fucking absolutely drugged in the around the parking lot. Um, it was motivating. It really was. Not to say that we can be like that anytime soon. I think we're a long way away from that. Just using my own nation as an example. And again, we're good. We're good, and we're still so far away from what they are. You know, and they've proven us, to that to us over and over and over again. And essentially every event we've ever, kind of frenzy we've had them. I mean, essentially just everything. The only time we beat them is when I don't give baby her no items match in Triangle War or DoD. And yeah, and I still won't be, because I want to beat you in something. No, no, I'm kidding. 'Cause even those are tough. But guys, man, I can't express it enough. And I know a majority of these podcasts that we do, we always kind of revert back to something along these lines, about participation and, building teams and having like minds because I don't know, man. I feel like spending money on the game is obviously a thing, and I don't want to take that away from everybody, but me personally as a spending player, I'm becoming like aggravated, with it. I'm becoming aggravated with the relentlessness of it. And I think they're just being, a little greedy, and maybe it's just a right now thing, anxious to see if it's gonna get continually worse. But yeah, I'm definitely a little, you know, usually I would have bought out that stupid wheel thing for the dragon puppy. But like I'm still turned off from last week's like podcast. If you guys heard my voice or whatever, I know I was tired and in Vegas and all that shit. But like I was serious, man. Like that shit aggravated me. And and I think it's just lurking into, releasing this officer and then not allowing us to fucking open it. It's just like what are you guys fucking doing? Do you want us to spend money? Do you not want us to fucking spend money? I don't know. They're aggravating me right now. So that's just where I'm coming from. But like everyone else that's, spending money casually and, continuing to play the game because they like it, especially if, you've been around for say more than a year now and you got that, your year in review and, all that fun stuff, right? That we recently just got with this anniversary crap. Um, you know, if you've been playing a specific game, you've been able to show up at a certain time and place, to support a specific team
Oh,
for, call it over a year, you place yourself in a position to be held accountable, and I think that being held accountable as an adult is something that's fun and new sometimes for people. But I'll tell you, man, once you get all those like minds together, there's really, not a lot of things that are better. My favorite time is, during Elite Wars when we can bring 90 or so in an event because, for us, and, I'm being clear as a bell here, for us in 425 GFK, like that's the only time we can bring that many people together. Not for a wasteland, not for a polar, not for a void war. I mean, typically we play Elite War on Sundays, so we do, can get that quote big battle directly after Elite War. But we also know that everybody sees those gold shields in GFK and Elite War, so they know that to shield the fuck up, and take a couple of hours off. And so it's super rare to be able to utilize that, 90 plus participation in Elite War directly after, in a void or something like that. But Elite War is the only event that we can show up like that on a consistent basis. So, again, I was kind of moseying on in the Lions chat the other day after the ass whipping, just asking, like how do we get to the next level, or how do we at least attempt to get more people to show up for this and that, and it's something that obviously is I don't want to call it a struggle because we're a great team, but I'd like to get better, and working on perfection, is is always something that I've personally struggled with. So it's like they've got it, you know, they've got it, and it's like right there, it's obtainable. People should be shooting for it, man. So shout out once again 255 for really putting their 2 cents together and building a pretty solid team, and always keeping a fresh ass in that seat. You know, like I personally think that like I want to see 621 and 255 go to Elite War, right? I do. I want to see that happen because I don't know, man. I feel like 255 wins that, you know, even though 621 like's got some stronger castles and they clearly spend more money over there. I don't know. I feel like 255 wins that. I don't feel like anybody's beating them right now. Not to like give info, but like 255 and Sin, they have a great relationship. And I played them both in Polar this week. Like, go fuck myself, right? Like, I play Sin and 255 in Polar, you know? It's like, God, man, thank God I don't like really like to play that event because what an ass whooping we're gonna get in a couple of days from those two teams, I'm sure. Um, but if it's not like those three or four teams that can beat us, which Campbell just places in our face like every other day to I feel like to humble us for whatever reason. It's always fun, but yeah, like these are things where it it would be tragic to not be able to build something similar to that, even if it takes years. Like because again, it does. For you nations that are in your 700s and 900s, you're probably just now starting to really feel that, that participation woe. People are starting to potentially put the game down, and you've probably lost a couple of good cities out to the fucking wasteland, and it pisses you off. So, be proactive. Again, 425. If you go to our nation chat, you'll see a guy pretty much saying, if you're interested in, if you're leaving the game soon, if you're interested in selling your city, whatever, like let us know, you know. And we just want to make sure that it, hopefully it doesn't, go off to the wasteland, and go out there to level one mine somewhere after you take all the resources out of it and it teleports to never land because nobody took the time to reach out to the old owner and whatever the case is. Another thing that I think is something that should be talked about, is communication outside of the game itself. I've heard lately that there's numerous different ways that some of the quote newer nations people love to like decipher us newer nations we do shit differently. You really don't, but anywho, um, talking to building a team in the game is something that works really well. However, the people that are doing it at a high level, they're able to contact essentially every one of their members. Somehow, some way, there's a whether it's a master list or it's a Discord server, and it's mandatory to be there. I think there is a couple of um, maybe countries that don't have Discord for whatever reason. I could be wrong when I say that, or everyone can use their own app. I think there's a handful of them out there that people use. I'm not going to sit here and go over them all because I use Discord. It's really the only one I use. People ask me, do I have Line? Do I have this? Do I have no? I have Discord. That's it. It's all I have. And that's what I personally use. I don't know what other nations use, for their everyday life. I know 621 567. They use Discord as well. I'm 98% certain, 255 uses it. But Discord's been great to us. I think people build whatever they build on other platforms. I think it's cool, but I do think it is absolutely, absolutely mandatory to have communication with your team. And if you're one of those nations that prioritizes Void War, Frenzy, and GC, I think you need to have communication with at least the leaders of your other alliances. At least have the availability to get a hold of them in the event of whatever. So, making sure that you have something set up or somebody. I know there's a few people out there that offer to build Discord servers. If you're if you happen to be in the audience tonight, why don't you go ahead and drop your information in the chat? That'd be pretty cool. If you're one of those people that are building those servers out there, drop your info in the chat. I'm sure you might get a couple of hookups because I had somebody build my server. Pretty sure a couple of the other servers, out there that I know to be pretty cool were built by others and then passed over. So that works out well. But yeah, you got to be able to talk to your team. If you think that, you're going to be able to just rely on people logging into the game at a certain time for a certain event, or just being accountable to, say, a void war and you got the enemy shield falling randomly, if there's only 7 or 8 people on the line, maybe you can't kill them, you know? And there's really not a way to make people's phones go off from inside the game, right? Other than like sending, I don't know, fake attacks and dumb shit to their city. So I think it's imperative, guys, to, be able to uh, come up with the best way possible for you and your leadership team to get a hold of the rest of your team. And again, at least the leadership or the top players, for that matter, of the other alliances in your nation. Um, Once you get it, down and packed, you can potentially open that server up to, to the community, build a channel, whatever, whatever. I think that is good for recruiting. I think that's something that, 425 is thinking about doing is maybe opening up their server to a little bit more of the community stuff, for recruiting purposes. I think that's, been great for call it, Enoch server's been amazing for spreadsheets, and I call it the nerd channel, right? Shout out to those guys over there in Enoch server. It's been great. Learned a lot from those guys. But I'm also sure that it's helped them with a little bit of recruiting as well. It's the fact that I know it's Enoch server, not a specifically 255 server, but just using those style of things as examples, I think that's good for the community. I think that people can come to the better nations. Like Barry. Shout out to Barry for doing what he's been doing for essentially years. With the community and his Discord server there for his nation. That server that we're in, that's his regular server for his nation and his team, that he's opened up to the community for, a million different things. So shout out to Barry and everything he's doing over there. But even Woody's channel here, like these are all things that the community is really good with. And, I think that a few more of those for nations that know what the hell they're doing, it's almost like you need to be vetted, right? Because I don't think that, we want people joining shit servers and getting shit information. It's very similar to, following shit YouTubers. We don't want those things. We want good, clean information for the most part being, rattled around out there in the community. So, getting into the right servers is good, but I'll tell you what, man, you guys need to be able to get a hold of your team, you know, um, be able to make somebody's phone go off and get them to come to the game because with a simple at everyone or at here whatever whatever, you should be able to generate at least a good handful or more, depending on how many people are already online. You should be able to bring some more people to the game in a few moments time to be able to potentially kill that big city flying around without a shield, or potentially catch something decent anyway. So these are all things where I feel like, again, it's all team driven, guys. Like I'm kind of really like, I don't know, been getting aggravated with the always talking about spending money, and I feel like it's something that I know the community wants, right? But like spending money on the game is especially if you're the newer nation, man, it's like you have to spend it everywhere. It's like, oh, where do I spend this? Bro, everywhere. I'm so sorry to say this, but you have to spend it everywhere. And I feel so bad for, the people that have to open the game and look at 20 officers to build and all of those things. It, like gives me anxiety thinking about it. It really does. So I feel bad for you guys. I'm gonna always say it. I'm gonna continue to say it. So yeah, where do you spend money? Like everywhere, man. I'm sorry. So at least some of the newer, older nations, if you would, like the 650s and ups or six to like 900s. Like I think that's a really good, little area right now. Again, there's some good teams being built in like the 858, 904, 75. There's some really good things going on up there. I don't want to always talk about the things that I know around me because that's what I know around me. I do like to keep my eyes open to the newer nations and stuff like that. But ultimately, I don't really fight you guys, so I really don't know. But I can see like Elite War ranks, and I tend to find some of you guys in like Polar and weird events like that every so often. But just seeing the Elite War ranks is enough for me. Like that's enough. It's easy to see who's building a team, who's not. It's easy to kind of see, where the priorities lie, regardless of, anything. Like I'm going to continue to break Holbrook's nuts until him and his team start pushing Elite War. And, because like, I don't know, I think these are things that people really should be focused on. And if you got a team, it's kind of easy to focus on them, you know? don't want to say easy, but it's definitely a little bit less stressful. You know.
Hey, LG, this is Big Bird. Let me jump in one point that I had about what you were saying about communication. My feeling is for nation leaders specifically, like, R5s, R4s of the top alliance, that's typically where you're going to find them. I think don't limit yourself to just Discord. I think Discord is my personal favorite, but I know a lot of non-English speakers also use Viber or Line. But my advice would be, for those secondary alliances, try and meet people where they're at. Don't ask them to necessarily learn Discord right away. If they're comfortable with Viber and that's the app that they're checking right away when they wake up, same way some of us check Discord, try and meet those folks where they're at to start, and then try and bring them into the Discord fold for the nation. So you've got kind of multiple lines of communication, multiple places you can say at everyone. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. It's a great idea. I feel like anything that you can do to generate. I mean, even if it's catering for a little while. I mean, again, if you I'm not one of those people that have Viber, blah 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 blah. But I have guys in my alliance that have Viber and all of those apps. Man, there's so many of them. WhatsApp and this app and this. There's like 13 of them, and So yeah, we have those same style of things. So anything that works, right? Like yeah, I think
Yeah,
it's great to have
it's
everything in one place. But if it whatever works to get people in the game, because you got to put it in, right? Nobody's gonna just show up, right? Like, sure, they're gonna log in, they're gonna look around. You might even, be one of those guys who's like, "Oh, is there any targets?" It's like, "No, motherfucker, there's no targets, bro. We've been looking at this shit for like 9 hours straight, dude, and there's no targets. Don't come to the game talking about is there a target, you know?" And but getting all these people online at the same time is difficult. It's something that takes effort, and it sure as shit takes leadership. Sure as shit takes somebody, reaching out, sending messages, making prepared times, making countdowns. I'm notorious for countdowns, man. Fucking 19 hours till the next Elite War. Set your alarms and your timers now, motherfuckers. Because you need to be there. And every time I log in, I always check the timer on whatever event. This many hour, whatever, whatever. Just leave. I always leave the Alliance chat with something along those lines. When I'm going to bed for the night or just logging out for a little while, it's just like, hey man, 14 hours to the next, da, 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 da. So anything that you can do, to generate, motion creates emotion. So when people are moving and very similar to the alliance chat. I think I said this 5 or 6 podcasts ago. If you're one of those alliances where you log in and all you see is join, ruin to rally, and everyone just doing their fucking dailies every day, and no one's talking shit in alliance, no one's having a good time, no one's blah blah blah. No one's doing that, man. Like, dude, get out of that nation. Just do yourself a favor and get the fuck out, because it ain't fun, man. Like at any given time, and in 425, anyway, we're talking some shit. We're razzing on somebody. We're, you know, there. There's. I mean, it's not everybody. There's a good core group, right? I mean, call it 5 or 12 of us, some shit like that, depending on who's online. But man, you got to keep the chat rolling. You got to keep it, you know, vibrant and fun. Got to bring that energy in some capacity, especially when sometimes you're not getting fights. Our past few void wars and stuff like that have been kind of boring. Honestly, I'm hoping for a good void war against 373. So shout out to Faith and those guys over there. We're hoping to have a good fight with you guys this coming Sunday. But yeah, it's been one of those weird weeks, after getting our asses whipped by 255 and having a great turnout for Elite War. And I'll tell you, as a leader of that particular alliance in GFK, I'm trying to rack my brain on, how do we get, maybe I can't get 90 in these other events, but how do I go from like 50 to 70? I feel like I can do that. I feel like, with a little bit of time, and a little bit of, maybe pressure, people, will want to show up, but I want the willingness to show up because of the similar mindset, and they want to be there, not because, you know, I'm asking or other leaders are asking. I want it to be I want you to be here to fuck these guys up with me as much as, the next guy. It goes a long way. But that communication's key. And I think Big Bird's right, meeting people in the middle. Because if you're a Viber guy and you get Discord dropped on you, it's completely new. Um, maybe you're not paying attention to the notifications, or if you get dropped into my Discord server, and you don't know how to mute things and hide things, you're gonna get 10,000 notifications in like 2 days, So yeah, these are all a thing, and Discord's not I don't really even know how to use it 100%. I know how to add everybody and do roles. That's about it. But we got a guy for that, and I suggest you find a guy for that if that's the case. There's a lot of cool little things I've been seeing, right, too, in some of these Discord servers, little AI chatbots and stuff like that. It's been man, tech is cool. It really is. So, things are advancing in the game. I think that the information in the community is advancing. I think that if you're with the right people and you're around the right team, and even if, again, I don't want to make this all about recruiting and stuff. Build a amazing team in Nation 1350 for all I give a fuck. Just do it the right way. Bring people together with like minds. Try to go get the people out of those little shit nations that are known shit nations. Everyone knows if they're shit or not, right? Like, am I wrong when I say that? Is there any nations out there that think they're good but they're not? Let me ask that. Anybody? But like, for
Feels
real.
like a loaded question.
For real though. Like, come on. Like,
Yeah.
somebody name a nation that thinks they're good but they're just not. Come on.
905.
There you go. 905. Thanks. I'm just okay. I'm just talking shit, right? I'm a little bit. I know nothing about 905. So, but the long and short of it is like those are, like, if they're shit, like, for real, man, those guys should be moving, and they should know that they're shit, and whatever is decent out of that nation, because every nation has some good players. Every nation has dedicated members. Every nation has, maybe one or two, spending players, even if they're not whales. They're spending a couple of dollars here and there. Nobody likes to spend a couple of dollars and lose often. It's one thing to lose. Like 425 loses. We're not one of those nations that has to win everything. Blah blah blah. But we lose. So it's you can't lose everything. Like everything. Unless you're in civil war, that's different. I feel like you can lose everything if you're in civil war. That's cool. Like that's similar to what we have in 357. But I think everybody should, if you're in a shit nation and you like the game, because again, every nation's got those dedicated members, those warriors, those people who sit around and just stare at the game for 12 hours, 16 hours a day. Every nation has them. You guys deserve a good shot at the game, and you really should be, maneuvering over to, the other maybe competitive nations within your globe, right? If you don't want to go to the old globes, right, like the 255s and all these nations that are recruiting out there, call us the old guys. Cool. Like, don't come to us, but at least go to somebody who's doing it right, and is trying to build a team, and they're winning some stuff, and you can add some value to that particular team just by being online and being available. Because I think participation is the majority of this game. I think that the game is so much more better played, more fun when you have 60, 80 people sitting next to you in the same event. So these are all things that the top nations have done. Right. I know that's what 621 has done. I know that's what 567 is in the process of doing. I know that's what 255 did. I know that's what 425 did. And the list goes on as you go up and up the nations. Right. I think that some of the newer nations, from like to call it the 700s up, they're just starting to, bring in these new members. I think some of the old members are coming down to some of these older nations as well. I know like there's a couple of guys who recently went to 255 from some like the 1200 nations, and they're loving life down there. They're gonna be like the fucking mascots. Was it Wallace or something like that? Recently went down to 255. He fucking loves it down there, right? And so like, but it's how could you not? How could you not?
One
So it's one of those
thing,
things.
one thing people, I think people should think about when they are in this kind of nations that you're saying move, go somewhere else, is not just like the participation levels, the CT level that you're able to get. It's also the time zone, because that will influence how much you will be able to
Oh, for
be
sure.
present or not for those events. So that should
Yeah, I
play
think
a big factor on choosing a new nation to move to.
definitely, and that's going to be one of the first things that any recruiter of these other nations, where you're potentially looking to go, if you're reaching out or being reached out to, it's one of the first things that you're going to be asked. Are you available during these times and these days? And I know when something comes to me, it's one of the first things I ask for a new recruit into 425. Hey, listen, we play Elite Wars on Sundays 95% of the time between this hour and this hour. If you can't be there, it's a deal breaker immediate. It's a deal breaker immediate. So these are things, at least in 425, like that's what we're doing. So yeah, time zone's 100% because there's no reason to, like for us in 425, Europe is tough for us. You know, Europe's tough for us. They're, not available during reset time. They're 12 to 1400s. Like I forget, it's like either super late or super early, one of the two. It's not the easiest for for Europeans in our particular alliance, but everyone's a little bit different. There's plenty of everyone's a little bit different. So yes, time zones, man, it's probably the number three thing on the list if we're putting things on the list. Can you be active? Are you going to be a pop in and a pop out player? Can we count on you to be there? You know, I usually ask if they can participate in those elite war times. If they can participate in the elite war times, unless they're like East Coast US, they can typically participate in like a Wednesday or a Friday around the same time. Again, unless you're like East Coast US and that's like the start of your workday or something along those lines. So there's a lot to be said about I think US and Japan works really well together time zone wise. We flip flop essentially 12 hours difference for the most part. So I think that works really well. Where the Americans can kind of be available during this time, and then obviously the Japan can be available while we sleep type deal. So I think that's a great mix. That's essentially what 425 is, primarily U.S. and Japanese. I do think over the last, call it 6 months or so, with recruiting and things like that, we are becoming a more diverse alliance. With people from kind of all over, but we're still chugging along in that Sunday, 12 to 1400 elite wartime. But yeah, I mean, time zone is right up there with, are you ready to fight? Because fighting alone isn't, something that, I'd love to promote. I think that this is a team game. I think that, 1v1s are cool and being the strongest is cool and, all that stuff. But what it's really about is, can I put 70 members in your city? Like that, that's what that's what I think it's about anyway. And I know some of the quote newer nations are getting away from those style of, playing, but again, I think that Void War should be made great again. I think that all of you guys should be, coming together, whether it's in a new nation or an old nation or a new nation or a fucking middle nation or whatever it is. But I think that Camel recently said that they had about 500 nations, and I don't think that there's but maybe 20 good ones. and I'm probably being generous when I say 20. And maybe I shouldn't say that because all your GC finalists, you can call them good nations, maybe, but are they fighting in Void War and just getting their asses whipped like really bad? If that's the case, like, you know, are they really that? Are Can you be the GC champion if you're just getting your ass handed to you in every void? Like I don't know. I feel like that's kind of laughable. Like if like I don't know, call out some of these Chinese nations that like literally will never win a void or a frenzy, but to be a GC champion, it's like that shit would be fucking laughable. It's like how are you gonna be a GC champ when you just got the living brakes beat off of you by a B team of the seventh worst nation of the globe? It's like that shit's fucking joke. So
ALG, let's there's a couple of things that I think are worth pulling out of what you were saying about elite wars and time zones. So first off, good nations have the ability to articulate clearly what their nation identity is, what their priority events are, and also I think to a certain extent when they're regularly scheduling Elite War, Wasteland, and Polar, which are the three that I think of. You have less flexibility in Wasteland and Polar. But I think having that consistency can be really helpful for people. The flip side of that is if you have a truly global alliance, and for example, Elite War is not a priority for you guys right now, what I would do for this event or for Polar, for Wastelands, like take a poll internally, see who can show up when. And, if it ends up being a mix and the, half your alliance can't make one time, you can think about flip-flopping times. That's a little bit different than what I would want to do personally, but I know in some of the newer nations, as you guys haven't had as many merges, haven't had as much time to, or as much of a player base as some of the older nations, so you don't have the luxury of picking and choosing. Consider flip-flopping event times every other week or something like that. But the idea is just that nobody goes multiple weeks without being able to play a single event. You don't want that because that's a limiting factor on their engagement in the alliance, so to speak. And also it can have merit implications down the line, I think. Then another thing that you talked about, LG, is, how to get from 50 to 70 in some of these secondary events. And I think for nation leaders out there who are trying to up participation in a particular event, whatever that event may be, my advice would be to put someone in charge of that event. Find somebody who really loves the event and is excited about it. Put them in charge of, building some hype, setting reminders, sending those out, reminding people when it starts and that sort of thing, coming up with a game plan. I think there are people who like some of these newer events a lot. Put that person in charge and kind of feed off their excitement and let that build some excitement in your team. And then after the event, have that person reach out to people. How did things go? What did you like? What didn't you? Because you want to build that positive snowball effect of the people who show up for the first time. They're like, wow, this event is a lot of fun. I'm going to come back next time. And I'm going to tell my friends who didn't show up this time to come to it next time. Thinking about how you can build that positive snowball can be very helpful. And I think also putting a person or a small group of people in charge of the event, so to speak, of, kind of the logistics behind it and all that sort of thing. I think that can be really helpful if that's a priority. If you guys are trying to push a new event, put somebody in charge of making that push. And I'll shut up now.
Yeah. All kind of rolls back to the leadership, right, Bird? It's just like who's doing what, when, how, and properly led alliances are going to, get results similar to, kind of what you're saying. Me speaking out loud about 425 give me a couple of weeks, man. I'm gonna be able to, whether it be by just asking people individually, whatever the case is, we're going to be able to up participation 10, 15%, in some of these, as you call them, secondary priority events, or, I just like them for they're good merit events, merit, Wasteland and Polar, they're good merit events if you can reach those, final tiers. I don't think there's many people reaching those final tiers outside of the, spending type players, but even the free to play players or what have you, they should be able to get like the first like two or three, like very easily if you're showing up, and and there's obviously people on the other side to fight a little bit, so you should be able to get these, things again just by showing up, and and again using, my particular alliance as an example, just by paying a little bit of, showing it some love, paying it some attention, asking some people to show up, and things of that. I think it sparks a little, more interest, because when you've been playing the game for as long as we have in 425, or the people who merged with us over the years, you know um you got to be dedicated to it to a certain degree, or it's like starting to become um a non-priority. And again, and as a leader, I'm the guy watching, trying to make sure we can have the turnover proper, because I do think that the turnover is something that is really big over the, as the nations become older, regardless of what nation that you're in. If you are planning on being around for a little bit of time, and, call it, going after a GC at some point, you need members to do that. Just letting you guys know, man, you need members. I'll use again 425 as an example. Anybody who's been around long enough knows, prior to 425 getting its second merger, we were one of the strongest alliances out there. Period, bar none, like in our globe anyway. But we couldn't win a GC because we didn't have the people, and we were just on the outside looking in. We were right there at the top, always in the GC finals, or there in the semis, whatever you want to call it. But without the people, you can't win those style of events. You just can't. I don't care how fucking strong you are, man. And I've been one of the strongest cities in the game for a long, long time, and without the people, man, it ain't shit. It's not. So you guys, in those newer nations, man, I know you guys got bot farm problems and all these fucking crazy problems. So I think it's going to be a lot harder, and again, being a community thing, you guys are going to have to work a lot harder to save your nation members, you know? And I hope you know what I mean when I say that. Like, you guys with all your bot farms and all your craziness, and recently I heard on one of these podcasts that they had every alive member in the nation, and there was like 70 people there, Like, that shit's scary, Whatever that nation is, I forget what nation it was that said that, but like that nation's gonna have a problem, in the future, and there might be a every nation up there is having those style of problems. So you guys need to be
Unfortunately,
weary.
unfortunately, it was me at
Oh,
1093.
there you go. So you got 1093, man, and you got all that shit going on, and there's fucking 80 total people alive, man. That ain't good, man. That ain't good. They ain't winning shit
That's
for a long, long time.
if we have 50s, a lot.
Yeah, that's
It's even
scary, brother.
worse.
Yeah,
Yeah,
those are scary times, So I know that these newer and what nation was that? It was 12, 11 something, or
1093.
1093. Yeah, so that, and we're into the 13s, getting close to the 1400s now. So these are going to be real big problems for you 900 and up nations. You guys are going to have to work a lot harder to fill these seats. So yeah, it's definitely a thing, guys. It's definitely a thing, especially if you're looking for a GC, or if you're looking for any of these events where you're going to go up against people that have the ability to have 90 or 100 members, type deal, like actually show up. You know, is we have that shit down here. I literally just went up against 255 and they had 99 members, bro. You got Holbrook out there sharing shit with, people showing up in big numbers in Polar, 87, 90, whatever those numbers, those are big numbers, guys. Those are hard to deal with. Those are real hard to deal with. So all you guys out there in these nations that are, kind of just sucking and, whether their mergers come or not, you know, I know that there's a lot of nations down here that, and call it these first 5, 6 globes, that even if mergers come, respectfully, man, like it ain't gonna do much. Like I can't think of two nations put together that are gonna beat 255. You know, I can't. Not with one team. Maybe there's more. I don't know. I just can't think of it, man. Even if like a 30 and a 52 came together, who's gonna lead them? You know, like I
I
don't.
think
I
the
don't know. I'm just talking out loud. I don't take anything away from those two nations. I love 50 and 30. It's just like I don't see. Like sure, there's a couple of super nation things out there, but even if mergers come through, man, if you suck, you suck. You know, like just call it what it is. If you suck, you suck. Like is 415 going to get a merger with somebody and become better? Probably not, man. Probably not. And I don't, and I just said 415 just because we're 425 and they're 415, but whatever. They're fat nation. They got some good cities in there. So I don't want to take anything away from them, but I don't know. I just don't feel like mergers are, obviously they're needed, right? They're part of the game. They're needed, for a lot of these good nations that are led well. Like I would love to see like, Barry get a good merger with somebody good, a couple of whale cities in there because I know that they're managed really well over there. Like there's a couple of really good nations that can get to that upper echelon, if they get the right nation. But I don't know that some of the I don't think that that's the answer. I really don't. I think that some of the style of stuff that 567 just did recently, I think that's awesome. I don't think that you can do your own nation merger. I think that's a little tough. I think I said this a few podcasts ago when this all came out about 567. Like they had a lot of great cities there. I don't think a lot of nations can do what they did. You know, so but I do think that you can get people to come take over cities and and build a halfway decent group, regardless if you spend money or not. I think you can find like-minded people that are similar time zones and kind of build your own little thing. And I think that it's a lot more fun if you're able to do those style of things. Because again, I think the upper nations, if you speed it up a couple of years, because man, I've been playing this thing going on 5 years now, man. You know, I've legitimately been playing this game going on 5 years now, and if you speed it up for some of these newer nations, 5 years from however long you guys started, man, I think you're going to be in a rude awakening if you stick on for that long. And if you don't plan on sticking along for that long, like then you probably shouldn't be listening to this podcast and get the fuck up on out of here and do your thing. But if you're going to be playing for a little while and, again, you do enjoy the game and, whatever brought you here, like for me personally, like this is like my crutch so I don't gamble on sports, like for real. Like this is, I spend money here so I don't spend money on sports gambling, right? That's essentially me in a nutshell. So these are some of the things that I do personally, but like I've been here about 5 years now. So for those of you guys in these newer nations or whatever, building teams up there in the globe, sevens, eights, nines, wherever many globes there are now, you guys, if you're going to be here for some years, and especially for some of you guys that maybe been here about 2 years now, year and a half, 2 years now, you put some time, obviously some money and, effort into whatever it is you've been doing for a couple of years. If you're any type of man, woman, leader, whatever, if you got some, cojones about yourself, you're going to take pride in these things a couple of years later. So, you don't want to be one of those nations that suck but think you're good. You don't want to be that because people kind of like point and laugh.
Should we
So, it's a lot. But go
sorry,
ahead.
should we create a section in this podcast where nations that want to recruit have like 30 seconds to make their case and recruit people?
I mean, I'm always open to anybody kind of talking and asking questions, and I would prefer to vet those people, so maybe if you want to reach out, and you can talk to myself or Holbrook or Bird or yourself, anybody who's kind of been doing this podcast with us. So yeah, I mean, if you're a couple, one of those halfway decent nations up there, that we've been talking about, or we haven't been talking about, hit us up. And yeah, we can definitely. I don't see. I think that's actually a really good idea. Put a couple of voices on here for some, nations that are doing their thing. To bring some players in. I think that'd be cool. But I would want to vet them first. I wouldn't want some random idiot saying, "Yeah, yeah, come to this nation," like yours, right? Like, come to 1090, whatever, and come here. It's great. And there's like fucking three players playing with their fucking wheat farm. You know.
Oh, of course, we can vet.
So yeah, we can vet. But yeah, I wouldn't mind getting a couple of these players, from some of these cool nations up there. Because again, man, I think 858, I think 904 are great nations. I think 785 is awesome. I think Holbrook's really cool. And I just kind of been getting to know him since basically since we did this podcast. I've been getting to know him a lot better since we started this. But like just seeing what he's done with his team, and there's his whales fucking off in La La Land fucking play with his nutsack somewhere. So he's doing his thing over there, man. There's some good nations. I don't really know above 1,000 outside of a couple of the spending players that I've seen grown cities in a very very high pace. And I feel bad for you guys, but yeah, I'm super open to that, man. I think that's actually a pretty cool idea. Because I think that it's something that just needs to happen. Because I don't think mergers are going to be a thing. Um, you know, maybe for those newer nations up there that haven't had one, I think you guys are going to have them. But I don't think us down here are going to get mergers anytime soon. As much as you cry about it, whine about it, whatever, I just don't see it. I could be wrong, but I do think that mergers will come and it'll be, the thousands and up type deal. Very similar to what the last nation, the last merger was in July or whatever it was. It'll be very along those lines. One or two of the straggler nations that have been waiting for years, and then a slew of the, essentially, 1,000 and up, wherever they left off on. So that's my opinion on the merger scenario. Why? I don't fucking know, but so I think the community really should be doing this regardless of mergers. If mergers come, even better. You have more people. More people in a nation, the better. I think that's good. If there's more than one top alliance, I think even better, especially if you want to be a GC nation and, have tactics and, other ways to think of the game other than just your own alliance. GFK and my second alliance, Mott, primarily Japanese alliance, we work really well together. So during times of war, we'll see their traps, they'll see our traps, vice versa. We'll feed off of it, try to get some counters in, things like that. It works really well, and we communicate very well together. So, I would encourage those to bring as many possible people, keep people in your nation, try not to start civil war unless you just absolutely have to. Because the people staying is what you need, a couple of 3 years later. Participation and asses and seats are a thing. You know, Uh, People aren't going to come to your nation if you suck. So try to have a decent base of leadership. Um, People that are showing up at the right time and together. A whale's always nice too, but I mean, if you look at a nation like 255, I mean, I know you have two like essentially very close to match cities in Baby and Sonic, but they're not spending like a mental is, right? Like if you go look at their island or whatever, it's just a different level of spend. So, like, but they have 40 or 50 plus C40 and up, right? Like 50 plus. Like, go look at that. It's fucking nuts. So they're able to, again, with that turnover over time and, you know, years or whatever, being able to put the proper people in those particular, you know, cities. And, you know, I'm sure again those cities have turned over numerous times over the years. You know, you finally get a team that is fully on the same time zones, same mindset, same fucking everything. And even if they weren't, at the drop of a hat, 75% of them are there. Like I'm sure in the like middle of the void war in a random time that nobody's supposed to be there, if somebody hits that Discord, man, like 65% of them are there like within minutes or seconds probably. You know, like the fucking participation numbers just go up like immediately. So I'm sure that took them years and years and years to do. But the only reason that they were able to do that is because they were good. You know, they were good. And and if you continue to go down the, you know, the ranks or the nations as they become good, as they go up, you know, for the ones that kind of stick out, you know, on that sheet of paper, you know, they likely did the same thing. They were good at a certain point, and you know, and they've been able to continue to, you know, bring people in, whether it's from new nations, old nations, whatever it is. I mean, in 425, we have a mix of players coming from, you know, new and old. You know, so and I'm sure that's very similar to, you know, other nations that are recruiting and things of that nature. So it's like, you know, I think that, you know, you're brought to a certain place for whatever reason. I think Big Bud said it almost perfectly. You know, you're going to talk about the events, the priority, who's who's showing up, when they're showing up. Like these are, you know, like if you're a GC, if you love GC and, you know, and you love Elite War, you're going to come to a nation like this or like that, you know. And if you love, you know, whatever, of polar, you know, or love everything, right? You go to 255, you know. It like the you know, it goes on and on and on. And you know, I think there's a home for just about everybody who enjoys the game. And if you don't like it, man, you can always return that city and get the fuck on, you know, and go somewhere else. And I'm sure that that happens often, you know, where somebody comes and they don't necessarily love the vibe or whatever the case is. And, you know, they, you know, hopefully they don't cause any issues in the process, but, you know, just mosey along on to the next one, you know, but make sure you give that city back to wherever you got it from. And, you know, kind of just go along and mosey along. But yeah, like these are all things where everyone really should be thinking about this, you know, or just fucking quit the game, which is cool too. Save some cash, you know, whatever, you know. But if you do like the game and you do all of these things that, you know, you join these podcasts and you're listening to my dumbass for a couple of hours and Bird and Holbrook when they show up, like these are all things that like, man, you gotta take a couple of minutes to look around, see what you got fucking working with over there. And I know if you're a spending player, man, you're dedicated to your city, you built it from nothing. Da, 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 da. But again, man, is it fun if you're like literally losing everything every time you come up against a, you know, a halfway decent nation? You're just losing, or you're doing it all yourself. Doesn't it piss you off when you leave Elite War and you're the only one fucking speeding around like an idiot, and you fucking look at your gold and it's like gone, 250,000 gold gone. You know, like that shit used to piss me off back in the day, man. It used to piss me off. So
Oh,
like these are
LG, what's up,
you.
dude?
How's it, bro?
Um, it's
How's
Holbrook.
that
What's up,
flight?
bro?
Are you back in town?
I'm finally here. All of Canada's immigration software was down, so that was fun. But I think people fall into three categories, and the reason this always comes up while we're talking is because they're either already in one of the top nations, or they really want to win, but they're not in a top nation, or they really don't care at all. And so, people already in a good nation, they aren't really talking about how they can try to fix their nation. But then people who listen to these things, they're really trying to fix their nations. But I think what you're driving home and they don't want to hear is that one out of 100 or one out of 200 nations can be fixed. It's not every other nation that gets a good merge. And something you said
Yeah.
earlier about people waiting for a merge, man, the fastest answer to your problem if you're waiting for a merge is fix your nation. If you can't fix your nation, you're not waiting for a merge. You're waiting to quit. So,
Yeah, I agree, dude.
but the other thing is like 80% of, well, I mean, you could put your percentages. I'd be curious what you think it is. I think, I don't know, maybe 5 to 10% playing the game want to be in a top nation. And then 10 to 20% wish they were in a top nation, but they won't get rid of their city. They can't get rid of that city. I think 80% of people don't care about winning, man.
What do they care about then, Holbrook? Like why are 80% of people logging into the game on a daily basis? Because I
Because
look at
they,
my alliance on a daily basis, and there's not a person that doesn't log in fucking every couple of hours, dude.
no, but you have
Like
one of the
unless
best alliances, man. It's most of these people literally got here by being trolled by the game on Instagram, and they
yeah,
just
me
want to
too,
talk to
bro. I'm
people.
I'm here for the
No,
fucking tower defense too, brother.
same thing, same thing. But I think 80% of those people are just happy with their nation, and they'll talk about how they're not happy, but they're not tuning into these podcasts. They're not trying to figure out formations. They don't have any philosophy of city. They don't even know what their stats are, man. They don't even know that like the middle row equipment components are super important. They're just here to say hi and maybe make some jokes and get on with their day. The only reason I have this opinion is because I asked a guy who is in a nation I definitely won't name that doesn't win. And I was like, bro, why do you stay? Like, you listen to all the podcasts, you know all of the information. What are you doing? And he was like, yeah, I don't know. There's some good dudes here. That's his
Yeah,
only
no, I
answer.
get that. I get that, bro. It's the only reason I'm in 357, dude. I swear on everything I love, bro. And like the small chance for a particular shield to drop, which hasn't in years. So like, it's the only reason I'm in 357 is the relationships, bro. So
Just
I
so
hear
I'm
that.
clear, I'm not arguing with you. I'm saying the people that are listening are probably, a lot of them are in that situation where they're still trying to carry their nation or their alliance, and they're still waiting for
Dude,
that
they're gonna
merge. And
quit, man. They're gonna
yeah, they're
quit,
going to
bro.
quit. That's what I'm saying. And
They're
they
gonna
would be
quit.
better off
Yeah.
taking a weak city in your nation than they would trying to carry a nation that's never going to succeed.
I agree with that. And I wouldn't even want that person to raise the city. It's like, dude, I don't even want you to come here and spend money. It's like, cool, if you are gonna spend money, like, all right, go ahead and do your thing. But it's like, dude, just be part of the team. Like I think
I,
you're just gonna be so much more happy with the overall experience with the game. And I would love to know, say in the chat, what are the other 80% of these? What are you guys playing the game for if it's not to win? You know? And
people have the wrong ideas too, man. So I have no cities available, but somebody came the other day and said it's a full-time job to try to find a nation to play in. And I just told them, like, tell me what events you want to win, and I'll tell you where I think you should go. I was just going to give the guy advice. And then
yeah,
he said, can I even go to a good nation if I spend $500 a month? I was like, bro, more than half of my alliance is free. We
yeah.
would love for you to spend $500 a month and come win with us.
Yeah, these are see that's where a lot of people get it wrong. It's like if again, I'll just continue to use my own experience in 425. You look around 425, man, we got some people spending money, you know. You look around, it's 621, man, like that's dragon heaven over there, dude. Those guys got some fucking dragons, dude. And there's some people spending this money in the game, but I'll tell you what, any team that's good 621 255 you man, we as long as you are active, man, we will find a city for you, brother. And like that's it. I don't if 500, dude, that's awesome, bro. Yeah, I'm trying to recruit that guy, Holbrook, for real. Because there's so many people that love the game, but just don't have the money, right? To raise the city from C37 to C40, you know, because that's where we are right now. We're in the place in 425 where C37 is a place where you can basically get to if you're a free player, being 5 years in the game. And I hope you guys hear me when I say that. 5 years in the game, and we're starting to get C37s. Right? 5 years in the game. We're starting to get C37. So I need all you guys to hear me when I say that. So it's a big thing. It takes a long time. And if you're not spending money, guys, you're gonna get to that place, and it's right about the like C35. You should start to see the difference in the uranium when the C36 came out, because that was the first upgrade. Was from C35 used to be max city level guys, right? For those guys that are new to the game, C35 was the original max city level. Then C38 came. So like the difference in uranium and all that stuff is the C36. You start to see that difference, and it just takes that much longer. Now, I know that uranium is a little bit more, I don't want to say freely given, but it's a little bit more obtainable, these days than it was, back when I started the game. But, everyone's going to run into this problem, you know, and the growth rate is going to drop. And if you're not spending money in the game, like you're going to see in some time, and the unfortunate part is it takes some time, and you might be too invested by the time you're able to see it, right? So just take heed, and if you're not one of those people that me and Holbrook were just talking about that actually want to win, that want to be in a winning nation, or because again, I really think that there's you know I mean, Camel said, I think they have about 500 or so nations. I think they said to Woody recently. And how many good ones are there, though? And I'm not saying like GC winner, like fucking top 5 elite war good. I'm saying like, like how many good nations are not great, right? Not amazing, perfect 255 nations, but how many like good nations out of that 500 are there? And I think again, every globe, whether it's 10 or 11 or fucking down here with us or anything in between, I think everybody in their globe knows who's good or not, you know? And I think everybody needs a good little shine in the face, a little splash of water in the morning and look in the mirror and say, am I one of those fucking good ones for real? And if you're not, and if you do want to win, then maybe you should you know, take some advice. I think you'll again enjoy the game a lot more. You'll stick around a lot longer, and all of those things. But it's going to be tough if you run into one of those, 1,000 nations like Hawkins was talking about with 50 total members in it. Like what the fuck are they winning? Anytime soon? Nothing. Just call it that. Nothing. Not winning anything. There's no GC in the horizon for them, or anything like that. So, I think you guys can kind of take take the advice of the people that are around you, or you don't. That's cool too. But I think that there's just a lot of ways for the people that actually listen to the podcast, that actually give a trip, that actually want to experience these things, and give it a whirl. I think just like Holbrook just said, like I'll give you a suggestion. Tell me what you like to play. Tell me, tell me what your focus is on. Tell me what kind of city you had in your old nation, or whatever. Because some of these new nations, man, these guys are coming out of C31s. You can't just give them a C37, man. Like, you know what I'm saying? So I think there's a lot of, it really depends, But again, it's about communication, and it's about asking, being a part of, whether it's listening to these things. I saw somebody on Woody's last video in the comments in YouTube. How do I become a member of your nation? No, look right there. The people are catching on, And I don't know if you guys are hearing this rain that just started fucking happening. Right? Probably loud. I'm trying to see if he dropped any. We got shit talkers in the chat. I love it. Hey, Kitten, man, we know you love to watch fucking Shields all day, by the way, but nobody wants to play with your raggedy ass T4, brother. All right? Nobody wants to play with your raggedy ass T4.
Yeah, we've picked up a bunch of players lately, and they've taken cities that are not amazing in 785. And we still bring 90 to Wasteland or more, 90 to Polar or more. And a lot of players, they're spending less, and they've said to me, man, like the game's fun again. So like even if we're not winning everything as much as we used to with some other whale or whatever, I'm certainly not going to call out other nations, but we got a lot of transplants in 785 who are maybe spending less and maybe in smaller cities, but they just say they're happy with the game again because they're playing with 90 other players.
Yeah, I mean, we recently had a couple of, same thing, college transplant, and we've in 425, and not necessarily in our alliance, but again, we have a couple of city recruiters, if you would, hey, if you're looking to get out of the game or whatever, just reach out to us. And I bought a couple of cities myself out of price just to make sure we can keep, access to them and have recruiting available to us. They've been super affordable, and long and short of it is we've had some very similar players that have bigger cities in other nations that have built them from ground zero, and they're hanging around in like the C36 or C37 right now, and they're living it up in the Alliance chat, and and I've even seen a couple of new names in some of the other alliances. So I almost feel like GFK and 425 like isn't the only ones that are reaching out to other players and whatever, trying to bring some people in. So it's not just happening in our little alliance there in GFK, it's happening in 425 as a whole. And again, I 100% agree with what you said. It's happening, in our nose game. I'm sure it's happening in some of the others. I'm sure Big Bird could say the same thing. Being a transplant himself, you spend less money. Like I've said it. I have the most gold I have currently, that I've had in the game in quite some time. I think like 6 million or something ridiculous like that. And I think it's a direct result of just having a team. I think it's also got a lot to do with not having a lot of fighting on Sundays. People are doing the sissy laws. But I think it's a majority of it is all of the other events are that much more affordable because the teams will have participating members and weighted lifted off of the shoulders of some of the other players. I never really carried 425, but I definitely worked my ass off. Not to say I wouldn't still work my ass off, but I don't think I would really have to. It would just be like kind of a waste, And it's been one of those. It's been a good run. It really has. It's been a good run. We had a good show out in GC this past whatever quarter semi end crapola. We went up against a couple of halfway decent nations that gave us a good little fight. It was affordable. And when I was done with it, it was just a 20,000 gold. 45,000. Where typically it's like 100,000 gold per condo state. So, and that's just me as like a spending player. I think it's even a lot more widespread with the mid tier play. Guys that maybe only have a couple of 100,000 gold in the bank there, and they're using it almost every event. I think that pressure is there much right now. At least in our line, which has been pretty old risk. And I'm sure I know it's like that for 355. That's what they pry on. They slow walk everything. Buyer told me straight up, fuck you out, lead guys called me, use my name. He basically said, fuck you, lead guy, I'm coming with 100 guys, It's like, fuck what you're saying. I don't care all that spending shit. I'm coming with 100 guys, And he did, and I couldn't say shit, and they just beat the fucking brakes off of us. I mean, I got max merit, don't get me wrong, but there was no beating those guys. Where was it? Bayou was just laughing his ass. Who is that Bayou laughing, this motherfucker? But yeah, like that's what it is though, and so I just urge you guys, man, to take the the experience of your parents. I'm not saying anybody's daddy, but our parents always just say, don't do that. Fuck man, just listen to me. I do it to my kids these days because I have the experience. And long and short of it is, man, if you're gonna stick around for the team for any more than what you are now, few years, 5 years, I've been in 5 fucking years. Man, it's a long time. But yeah, it don't. It don't get any easier. Keep participating member. I just can't express it enough. So it's a full-time job almost. Making sure that the wheels are greased and that turnover is happening, and you're not just left with fucking 20 guys ready for an elite war or something like that. Because I know there's teams out there that show up with like 30 in elite. It's got to be, got to fuck with you a little bit.
I have the
So,
I have the same experience as you, but I burn everything in polar. But our wasteland we're ranked third. I'm not even personally ranked very high, just because the team shows up so strong that I don't even bother to play. I'm there in case they need me, but we get max points almost every time. I'm happy to sit there and save consumables and let them get the merit. I definitely think that's the smart way to play. Obviously, I'm talking different events, but that's working for us. But did you guys cover GC at all? Like, does anyone even care? Did anyone show up for yours? Did anyone say other people showed up? Like, ours was incredibly
I don't
boring.
think, I don't think many are caring right now. I think maybe if anybody's really caring, it's some of the, the newer nations, the newer globes, I should say. I know at least, globe 6 and under is, already pretty much said. I know 255's taking it. I know 425's taking it. I know 621's taking it. I don't know who's going to win above that, honestly. But
732.
there you go. I forgot the name of it, but they're winning because they have like several times in a row now. They're going on like 4, I think, as well, right, or some crazy shit like that.
No,
And then
they 767 won last time, but I would still put my money on 732 personally.
so there's a nation above me that's won like 4 or 5 in a row. Who is it?
Above you, that would be 61, right?
What above them?
Oh, I'm not sure. Maybe 1111, 1111.
They haven't had that many. I
Oh
feel like
no,
somebody's on
904.
4 in a row. 904.
904.
Okay, there you go.
Definitely 904.
There you go. So like guys like that, like these are all, so these are, I don't think anybody's beating them, but maybe they're in the capacity where that slew of mergers in July might affect it. I don't know. I don't pay that much attention, but I know that they're a great team. So if you are merged and you're going to try to take them out, it ain't going to be fucking easy, But I think that there's,
Hey, lead God, this is Genghis from 904. Let me give a shout out to 926. We're in 904. We're on our 3rd GC. We're going for our 4th. We take it serious. They just showed up and they fought us to the very end. I'm not going to say they had no chance of winning, but they fought us all 3 rounds, and it was awesome. It was a non-kill event, and it was just great to do. So props out to them in a globe where we're always the perennial winners, but I just got to say it was a good time.
awesome, man. Yeah, we had a similar experience in 425 with 465 and 439. They fought us all 3 rounds. I mean, they couldn't win or anything like that, but at least they showed up. There's been numerous rounds, and whether it's you're boycotting Camel and GC and mergers or whatever, I personally think you'd be dumb not to show up. At least get your merit. At least get your 800 merit, whatever you can kind of sustain there, and then bounce. If you're not doing much, but long and short of it is guys, like, yeah, I don't think a lot of people are really caring much about GC right now. I think that a majority of, at least half of the globes out there are probably already defined. I think that maybe, whatever the 2 newest globes are, in their brackets, those might be a little toss up just because they're a little toss up because they're still brand new. I think everybody else is pretty much defined. I think the game's come out enough. I think they've had so many releases to where it's almost easier to see what these teams are because of the amount of spend. I mean, as much as I think it's hilarious, there in that video I sent in the Elite War against Ronaldo, there were 7 of us. 7. We burned 45 of them or 46 of them. Okay. That's, call it, I don't know what you want to call that, but there were 7 of us and we fucked up 45 of them. So I feel like the more and more all these releases and releases and releases come out, the more and more it's going to be, so much of a blaring. Oh, those got look at that. Look, blah 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 blah. Um, so that's going to be hard to beat. And I don't want to be one of those guys like if you can't beat them, join them. But if it's so prevalent, you might as well, at least go have a little bit of fun. It's better than just sitting in a shield watching them have fun when they come to your nation for void. You'd at least rather be on the other side so you can farm your old nation or some shit like that. It's just no fun, in my opinion. I think that Holbrook saying 80% of people play for just no fucking reason blows my mind. And we should change
It's not
that
that it's
somehow, some way. You know?
It's not that it's no reason. It's just what the guy said is the rewards are almost the same. So basically, like you just suffer the loss, you get rewards that are almost the same, and then you and your friends go back to laughing. Like it's not my mindset, but it was something that opened my mind to another point of view.
Yeah, I get it, man. Because I do that in some of the events like Triangle War or Polar. It's like I'm not pushing because we already got the tower. Like the tower, you can't get in. So the rewards are so similar. It's like to get to the next reward or whatever it is, the spend is so ridiculous that, in my opinion, it's not worth it. Or at least as a leader, we can stay as as a whole or as a group. Like, yeah, this probably isn't the best decision for us. So I get that, but the big thing here is winners and losers, bro. Like I don't know, man. I guess it's the difference of being raised and it's okay, little Johnny. Fucking no, motherfucker. It's not okay to lose, man.
I
No,
think
it's
it's a
not. Get up and fight and do some shit.
I'm with you, obviously, but I also think it's just a matter of perspective. If you think you're investing in your city, then I don't know. I don't want to talk shit, but I definitely have a different opinion. We're all spending for entertainment,
Yeah,
and
dude. Yes, dude.
every
My
dollar you
buddy,
spend.
my buddy Ricky says investing all the time, bro. Shout out to Ricky from 357. He's my buddy. He's going through some
ev-
cancer treatments right now. He's gonna beat it. But he
Bro,
always says investing, bro. I hate it.
every dollar you spend is a spend on entertainment. It's the same. Like it's not like you have an investment in a movie you just went and saw. Everything is an investment in entertainment. And if you're not entertained anymore, then get rid of that trash nation, man.
Yeah, dude. I so agree with that perspective, man. That's a good take on it for sure. Because it sure as shit is not investing, guys. It is not investing in any way, shape, or form.
Bro,
I'm not a
this thing
financial.
can turn off tomorrow, bro. Both of our cities can be nothing tomorrow. You have to think of it as entertainment. You have to think the money that you've spent was for the entertainment you already had. It's not even about the future because none of us know when Camel's just going to kill the servers.
Yeah, I mean, I
agree
feel
with
like
that.
it's such a. Go ahead.
I agree with that perspective, but speaking for myself, it was a little bit hard to just let go of what I built because I built that thing from scratch. And yes, at some point, especially in the beginning, I looked at it as investing in my city. That's the way the game is designed, especially in the beginning. It's a race. You're basically investing in your city, so you get that vision right from the beginning, and it's kind of tricky up to a certain point to do that, to change, right? If you do it earlier, then it's less heavy. If you do it after you put like a value of a decent car into your city, maybe you start thinking twice.
It's tough, but you got to
Yeah.
go pick up somebody else's car in a city that they got rid of. And then it's fine, right? Just sell your city
Agree.
for whatever you can get and go to a nation, take a worse city, but you're going to spend less money because you're not going to have to speed and try to carry the nation. I mean, I completely understand what you're saying. It's hard to walk away from any significant financial investment. But again, that's where
It's
I think
still an
people could,
investment.
yeah, people could change their perspective And it's like if you saw 200 shitty movies in a row, you wouldn't tell me about how you're going to see the next one because of the ticket prices you've already spent on.
That's pretty good. I like that. And another thing, which I recently saw, if you do have, if you're hanging out in your nation because you do have that little group of buddies or friends that you've been hanging around with for years, and you guys share pictures of your kids and you talk about real life and all this shit. Because I have relationships with people like that in the game, and man, bring them all. Like all you guys should leave and go to a new nation together, and bring your little cool clan of cool people to the next whatever, the next cool nation or whatever you want to call it. So you guys can travel together, and I've seen that. I've seen groups of threes and fives, kind of hanging out together and popping around. And there's I don't think there's a problem with it, because I think
There's a
friendships.
Sorry, LG. I was just going to say that the guy I said that came over that's spending 500 a month, and he thought maybe it wouldn't be enough, and I was like, man, we're happy to have you. Of course, when he came in, he was like, hey, by the way, I got another friend that spends just about similar. He's looking also. So like,
Yeah,
take those people in, and you're going to find room for them, right?
for sure, dude. 100 million%, man. 100 million%. And if you got friends, like that, and that's how it works. Word of mouth is amazing. It's the best, bit of advertising out there. So, and when friends travel together, again, you get to keep that relationship that you built, which I think is cool. Because the relationships in the game are big. It's a social game. It's what we do, and especially if you've been hanging around as long as I have. A couple of 2, 3 years, 5 years, like me. You have relationships with people. And I have great relationships with people from 357 and 425, and then, obviously the Discord relationships and the community relationships are great, but the ones you have in game in Alliance chat, they hit a little bit different. So I get it. Again, I'm currently in 357 98% because of relationships. Why do they don't come to 425? For the same reasons why some people don't leave their nations. And honestly, as much as I love some of these people, I wouldn't want them in 425 because of their style of gameplay. They're not active enough, or bubble. There's a good of a handful of different reasons. I would rather give that free C37 to somebody, a little bit different, right? So, long and short of it is the relationships are great. And if there's availability and you can travel together as friends and your nation's not the greatest, there's people out there that'll make it happen. And if it doesn't happen right now, you can plan for it. It's like, hey man, we got like 3 of us. So when you got like 3 decent 3 C36s, like let us know. Like we'll come hang out. And whatever works. But having that guy spending $500 a month, that's awesome. You know, and him bringing his friend, that's even better. You know, so I think that's great for the community. I think it's good for your nation specifically, Holbrook, and I think it's great for everybody to hear that those things are happening. I saw a huge shitty in 255 sell in like 15 minutes this week. Big money city, top city in 255. Things sold in like 15 fucking minutes, guys. It was like an auction, fucking boom. It was like they couldn't get it fast enough. I feel like. And I don't even know how much it sold for, the details, none of my business. But I know it was for sale and then not for sale fucking quick. And like these are things that's happening, and whatever. Big cities don't necessarily come up, all that often in the really good nations, but when they do, and you are one of those spending players, man, you gotta jump on it quick, and take advantage of it. I know there's some cities available in some of these top nations, like 567. Well, the one in 255, I think, is gone. But there's some good cities out there, guys. So if you are a spending player, ask the right people, and you probably get pointed in the right direction. Because there's guys out there like myself and Holbrook, that will point you in the right direction and not just be a selfish prick and try to give you like a trash bag city in our nation just because we want you there. It's like, nah, man, go check out this nation. That they got this over here, blah, blah, blah. I think there's a pretty decent community out there that, is aware of where these cities are, what's available. And again, based off of the events that you like and, the style of gameplay that you have, I mean, there's a nation for you, if you're active and, you're willing to learn, and you're willing to take some suggestions, and and things of that. It's going to put you in I think in a place where you continue to enjoy the game for years and years to come. Because honestly, if this last merger in 425 didn't go well, man, I was probably leaving the game. You know, and a lot of the guys that know me well enough know that I'm not talking shit when I say that. If the merger was trash, similar to the merger that I got in 357, man, I was so far out of this game, dude. You can bet your bottom donkey on that one. you know. But no, I got to have a decent merger with good people that were able to be trained, and they were active, and they enjoy the game, and they're not fucking ridiculous weirdo trolls, and like it worked out really well, and here I am fucking 5 years into this fucking thing. So, it's cool. So um, I know it's been a couple of hours here. I'm a little on vacation. I'm gonna wrap it up here in the next 10 or 15 minutes or so. So if there are any other like questions or things like that, let's start to fire them off now. But like guys, man, I can't say it enough. Like I can't say it enough. If the merger wasn't good, and how many good mergers are there when the mergers do come? Two, like for real. In each specific globe, even if you were to get mergers, there's only going to be a couple of good ones, you know. And then of those couple of good ones, it might not even work out because of whatever, one of a million reasons. I can sit here and tell you that there's probably a good handful of nations in our globe in 425, globe 5, when mergers came through a year or two ago, whenever it was, like, oh man, that nation right there is going to be really, really good. They just got these guys and that guy. Like I thought Nation 400, for instance, was going to be awesome. I thought, oh, there's another one out there that I thought was a 439 when the two big twin cities and pistols came together. I thought they were going to be great. I thought a few different nations were going to be really good after their mergers, and they just weren't. Respectfully to them. They're still decent and things like that, but a couple of these nations, it just never came to fruition, and it's and I feel like those players start to move on. I don't necessarily like to see Wales quit, but I think Holbrook and I said it a little bit ago. It's like, man, if those guys continue to just try to carry, and you guys can't build a team around these whale type style players, man, these guys are either going to quit the game or be recruited by one of the top nations out there. So if you want to keep them in your nation, and you do want to build a name for your particular nation number, whatever that may be, um, I think that if you work hard enough, it can be accomplished. But I think it takes a lot of effort. I think like nations like 904 going for their fourth GC. Um, I'm sure that wasn't easy for them to get to where they are. So just leave that for what it is. They put in the work, and just like anybody out there, in my opinion, who works their motherfucking ass off, you're gonna typically get a pretty decent result. Just based off of the effort and the English to be able to get to that particular place. So nations like that are gonna come out on the higher up on things. So I think that they probably did it the right way. I think that all of these other, nations that are either coming behind them or, have envy of them, winning 3 in a row or about to be 4 in a row, more than likely. Um, you know, what are you going to do to beat them? You can sit around and, wait for mergers and, you know, I don't know. I don't know how close it is up there, so I don't want to use specifics, but I know down here, I don't think mergers would change all that much. Not to say that 425 would win again, but I don't think it would change all that much. I would almost guarantee that we would be in the semis again. We'd be right there, and likely in the finals. I don't see anybody knocking off 621 or 255 anytime soon, even if there was mergers in both of those globes, you know, depending on the mergers, I guess. But I still think they would be there at the top. I mean, sure, somebody might beat them. I'm not saying that they're not beatable, but I think that they would still be up there in the top nations, regardless of the merger sets coming through. And then eventually they would get a merger too. If others around them would get a mergers, and then what? Then what are you gonna do? you know. So it's like these are all things that it's like we're just biding our time. It's like sure you might beat us, but eventually we're gonna get our merger again too, and then daddy's home. It's gonna be like that all over again. But all of those things are things to consider. Ladies and gentlemen. I mean, I can't say it enough that if you do like the style of gameplay that we continue to talk about in this podcast, if you are logging into this podcast and you're listening to Woody and you're waiting for his videos to pop out. I look at his videos and he's getting a couple of thousand views on these videos. You know, so a couple of thousand views on these videos, and um, seems like you guys are at least getting the information. So I don't want to say there's no excuse, like because again, there's emotions and relationships and all those things come into play. But you know, if you're just losing, like I don't know, man. I'm a man. I'm an American man, and I don't like to fucking lose. And shout out to the Europe guys out there. You guys beat our ass in the Ryder Cup, but we gave you a nice run for your money there on Sunday. So today was a good watch of golf. But it's one of those things where you should take a little bit of pride in it. We don't like to lose. I know I don't like to lose. And not to say that, again, that you have to win everything, but at least you go and you fight and you give your best effort. And I feel like there's plenty of nations out there that just aren't giving their best effort, whether it be participation or leadership or one of, probably numerous things. Um, I think if you work just a little bit or ask, just open your mouth, I think the right people can, again, point you in the right direction. I think that, people up there in those newer globes, those, call it 8 to, what are we on, 11 now or 10, whatever the fuck. We call it 3, 4 globes. You guys should really be paying attention, on how many people are actually playing the game. Because remember, you can show up to a GC with about 250 people. So if you are a GC nation, you want to be able to kind of feel that. And if you have a nation like Hoctage over there in the 1090s, you only got 50, 70 people, breathing in the entire nation. I think that's a problem, regardless if you get a merger or not. And if that's running rampant up there in those, call it newer 3, 4 globes, you guys are going to have problems, call it 2+ years from now. So
The,
something that you guys want to prepare for.
it,
LG, have you ever sorry, my bad. Go ahead, August.
sorry, it even makes it worse because we have those numbers after a merge. We had a merge not even 6 months ago.
Yeah, it's not good,
So
brother.
it's even worse.
It's
No
terrible.
good.
Have you guys ever heard the idea that you should be the worst player in a band? This is like a saying, I don't know, that I've heard a while ago that I like to live by, which is like if you're carrying the band, who are you going to learn from? So I think this goes to jazz bands, or I don't know. This saying goes back farther than I know. But if you're in a jazz band, then you want to be the worst player in the band, so you can learn from everyone. And
Oh,
I
I
don't want
love
to be I don't want to be
that.
the worst player in my alliance, but I don't want to be the only player that everyone can learn from. It's so much easier. People pretend like they spend a bunch of money on their city, but then they spend years spending money without guidance on a city. When you could take a worse city and go hang out with LG, and you can actually probably get access to his officers, which is going to be way more valuable than, I don't know, anything you find online for free. So like that's just another thing that I would echo to people is like, if you're the smartest person in your nation, maybe there's another nation for you.
Yeah, especially if you're not that smart and you're the smartest person in your nation. Like
For sure.
there's some, yeah, it's tough, man. And very similar, but from a business standpoint, if you're the smartest man in a room, man, you'd find a better room, and And that's just all there is to it. You always want to be able to learn, and I'm still learning, right? I'd like to think I'm one of the top players in the game, and I'm pretty knowledgeable and all in most aspects. And I'm over here still learning. Shit, you guys just reminded me last week that I could fucking click the auto on the Infinite Zombies. I'm playing that fucking thing every day, bro, for like 2 weeks or whatever it was since that stupid ass shit was released. And then
LG, I
that
could
big
not stop laughing. I
That
could
bro,
not
was
that
stop
auto,
laughing when I told you that. I was like,
bro,
why don't you just click the auto? And you were like, wait a minute.
fucking
It was
auto
it was
button,
like the
dude.
longest silence I saw in your podcast.
it
Because I had
was
to think about it for a
hilarious.
second, dude. I had to think about it. It's like, whoa, there is an auto button. So yeah, I've definitely saved some time in the last week or so. So I appreciate that. You know, but yeah, like I'm over here still learning, man. So don't be always be coachable, always be teachable. These are just general conversation things, but like yeah, it goes to the game. You have to be able to be at a place where somebody can give you even constructive criticism, or whatever the case is. You need to be able to, take in that bit of information and hopefully process it to get, better, because that's ultimately what we're here for, is to be better on a daily basis, regardless if it's game or real life, like that's why I'm here anyway. I'd like to be better than I was, yesterday anyway. So long and short of it is you put yourself in a position with a little bit of work, a little bit of effort, a little bit of communication, mix all those things up. And, I'd like to think that, people are really going to enjoy the game. Because, yeah, if you're going to get the information from some fucking farming weirdo that's going to tell you that 11198, that's going to get you the win, like these are difficult times,
I didn't want to
and
say that to you, but like in the very beginning of a nation, it's not bad because they're building troops and no one has Thor and no one has Weekend. Nobody has those things in their Titans yet. So like in the very early stages, not so bad. But
pre Void War, I agree. Right, so
yeah,
pre Void War being open, 100% works. So works good with stealing shit from low tier farms and not having high losses for free to play players. Right, when you're moseying around trying to find some fucking minerals or steel in your nation somewhere. So yeah, I agree. Pre Void War,
I'm just
that particular
remembering the first time we
formation.
did our first Civil War. We did rallies. We did like 5-minute, 10-minute rallies. And 10 minutes later, they would be sending me messages for like 10 minutes. Like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? What are you doing? Why are you coming? Why are you marching toward us? Don't hit our cities. They wouldn't bubble, right? And they would reinforce the city and get smashed. And it was like all they had to do was just bubble, or Alliance Shield, and it was the person that was online that was griping to me that we were hitting in the.
I've got 3 planes in GC with 3 fleets that can take a lot of that into it. So there's actually a lot of math that goes into it.
Yeah, and
That
especially if you're
makes sense.
using situations for GC and situational things for specific nations, it means a lot, and if you're smart and if you're doing things just like you just described, you're going to be able to put your nation in the best case scenario to get to the, whatever the W, and I think that that's ultimately where we're trying to go is the W. I think that everyone, going back to the numerous podcasts we had on this particular channel, every nation's a tad bit different, Because me personally, we're a GC nation, but I'm not doing my second and third planes right now. I'm focusing on
Here's the
opening.
greatest thing.
I'm
It's like
opening all those skills.
you can take, so you get your first plane, let's say second skill, the golems, you take it up to level 33. As long as you take your second plane up to level 20, it inherits all of those skills. It gets 100%
Yeah,
of
no, I
So
hear,
it's
I
awesome.
know that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I hear you. I just don't see, like for me personally, I'm trying to have,
No, I get that.
like one of those. Yeah, I would rather spend those, particular whatever the chips or whatever the fuck they're called, on whatever level 34, or getting my other skills to, whatever. I'm a skill guy, right? I'm the guy that's going to tell you your best bet is to open up all the skills, and then your next best bet is to max all those skills, right? And so I'm going to max all those skills before I even touch my second plane script.
I'm
I have a
sure
couple
Holbrook
of
will be
gold
looking now.
planes.
Yeah, what happens is like in the first 20, it's actually not that expensive for the first 20 relative to the next 20 to 40. So that's where the sweet spot is. You actually look at it and you say, well, I'm a GC
Yeah,
nation.
I'm running everything to 40. I'm so giving you a
not cheap.
glimpse here. I'm running everything to 40. I'm maxing out all the skills. And prior to me running the 40 to 55, I'm gonna go my second plane. Because I typically stop on my second plane, but whatever. I have a third gold, but I'm gonna go that route. But then I'm gonna go right back to getting from 40 to 55, whatever that takes. And I think I'm probably gonna, way very similar to the way Holbrook just described his little scenario, how he's, what I'm gonna do. I personally, outside of the, whatever, I think I tend to agree that I'm going to go in like the best case scenario, but you're really only getting, the HP and the attack, from 40 to 55. There's really not a lot going on there. I'm not getting any more Titan revive or any more golems once everything's maxed on the skill side. But at that point, I'm just keeping my plan alive as much as possible. God only knows how long that's going to be. But I don't think it really matters. But maybe somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. Once all the skills are maxed, I mean, what does it really matter which fucking one that you do? From 40 to 55. Am I missing something?
No, I agree. It's pretty. If your Titan comes back at 45% or 44% or whatever it is, reviving in a battle, it's pretty nasty. That you can get that kind of stuff.
I mean, it
coming back.
goes up to like 60% or something.
Oh, I know. Yeah, I'm just. Some of the
What I'm
numbers
saying
were
is,
probably all over that.
once the skills are maxed, it's a serious question. Am I missing something? From 1 to 6, from level 40 to 55, is there anything in there other than HP and fucking keeping the plane alive? Am I missing something? Not, right?
I don't know.
Really
That's why we're
Yeah, I
hedging.
don't
We're
think
hedging
so.
a little bit. Like I'm picking my
I'm
fleet
looking
to
at it
do
as
some.
we speak.
I'm adding extra planes now. That's why.
Yeah, no, the way you're going, I mean, there's
We
nothing
have
wrong.
we have look, we have 5 whales, so we can distribute it across it. So we're trying to do it,
100%.
and we're in a different scenario. 5 whales for us in our neck of the woods is a whole different story than what you're dealing with, right? So I can experiment.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea, especially if you guys are, continuing on focus on, keeping that little streak alive. But I'm looking at the plane as we speak, and yeah, the only thing that you're getting from 40 to 55 is the whatever top defense with it as we look at bigger. So when I'm leveling up that equipment, there's not much there other than just that. So yeah. I'm getting the defense, attack, and HP of the plane itself. There's really nothing else to gain a value other than once the skills are there. So yeah, I would probably people are, being able to upgrade, where their city is, how they're spending money. Maybe you could focus some people on some of those skills that will help the group as a whole. Like the Golem, like just at first glance, guys, essentially what I told my team is, focus on the level 3 balance. That's what I think, 85% of players should be focusing on. I think that particular skill is likely open for most players, right? A lot of these skills are not open for most players. So you have to also realize that, especially if you're a spending player like myself. You log into a different city that's got a perfect plane for combo sake. The majority of those skills are not open. So there's only so many things that, a lot of these players can see. So you want to be able to look at, the alliance or these style of players as a whole and give people a great focus, And I think for right now, without knowing everything, very similar to the whole book to say we don't know just yet. Even some of us whale style players, we don't know what the answer is just yet. But I think the answer is for a majority of players, doms. I think that increased damage to melee on the second tier is also great. I think that the third tier level 3 with what is it, HP defense and attack for melee, well, I think that's what that skill is. So level 2, that whole level 2 is great to focus on. And I think that a majority of players have that entire level 2 equipment open.